Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for episode number 119, which is a review of the year 2020. Like all of you, or many of you have stated online, this was the craziest year. It was definitely the craziest year of my life. And when I think back to the beginning of 2020, it's even crazier to me how negative it went because it was going so positive. What you guys did not know is that Craig Powell and I, my partner Thomas, AGH, we had a deal to go shoot a 2-hour long special. This was for a major cable network here in the U.S., and it was going to be a Return to Cockatoo Island special. And we were actually talking to the Australian government, but they didn't know it was us. We had producers for the network that were negotiating a show that, for all they knew, was just a history show about the island. So we were incognito, very much trying to get back on the island without the Australian government knowing that it was Craig and I. And we were just about to the point of announcing this. We had spoken to the island. We had, or they, I should say, the producers that were working with us, they had negotiated the location fees. I mean, we were that close. And then a series of fires started, if you remember. Australia caught on fire. 72,000 square miles burned. Over 1 billion animals were burned. And this put everything on hold for us. But I felt like, okay, I totally get it. You know, humanity comes first in these things. And the island, Cockatoo, was actually being used by helicopters that were sitting down and pulling water out of the bay to try to, put out fires. And, it was just impossible for us at that time to get to Australia to shoot this. But I thought to myself, this will pass. This will pass. It will either be under control or, like fires do, they burn their route. So when, January 1st came of 2020, I felt like, we'll be cool. We'll be cool. Just hang tight. Hang tight. But beyond the business interest, because I have loved ones over there, Craig, Nikki, Rocco, Diesel, all of Craig's crew that I've met, I'm watching the news every day, so every morning I'm waking up and I'm checking to see, what is going on in Australia. And then on January 26th, I wake up and I turn on the news and I see all the smoke coming from Calabasas. And I could not believe the headline. Kobe Bryant dead. It's like, Kobe Bryant's dead. What? And it just became worse as the report kept coming out, because not only did Kobe pass away in a helicopter crash, he was with a number of individuals, including his daughter, his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna. And, man, you want to talk about darkness coming over a city. It was the first time I had felt that in my life, as far as, my adult life, of seeing a death or someone passing away that mattered so much to a city that it brought the city to a crawl. But it did. I mean, businesses shut down. Things came to a stop in Los Angeles. And the city was hurt badly. I'm thinking, man, that is, jeez, man. You hear this stuff all the time of, these cliche type things like, nobody's promised a tomorrow, and it's true, And you look at this and you go, look, here's this guy that's, so incredibly valuable to so many people, starting with his own wife and children, but an entire city that this man many times has had on his shoulders and lifted the spirits of this town over and over again. Look, he wasn't without flaw. Kobe's had his share of controversy as well, but he was very, very valuable, to this city, and it was something else, man. It's incredibly, distasteful to say, this is someone's fault, but what we did learn is that the pilot was concerned, about low level clouds that day, and fog and traveling. And what we learned is that Kobe wanted to go, and this pilot was just not prepared, to be flying instrument only. And that's what happens when the clouds come so low that the helicopter has to either rise above them, but there's a hard deck. There's only so many feet a helicopter can go. You can't take a helicopter like 30,000 feet, or they got to fly below them. But there's that middle ground area where the pilot can't see anything because he's engulfed in clouds. And what we learned is that this pilot was trying to raise the helicopter above the clouds, but once he got in the clouds and had to read only his meters to fly, he became disoriented. And while he thought he was quickly rising above the clouds, going over 200 miles an hour, he was actually going the opposite way. The helicopter had turned and banked hard, and it was not going up. It was going straight at the side of a mountain, in which they say it hit the mountain going over 200 miles an hour. So there was no braking, there was no anything. They came firing out of those clouds right into the mountain. And that was a brutal one, man. If you were here in LA, you felt that one. You felt that one. So like I often do whenever great tragedies strike, I just try to bury myself back in my work. And, look, man, I said my prayers for everybody involved in that helicopter accident. And went back to work because I had a film to get released. Phantom Rider. And I knew I had at least another month of work on it to get it out, but I eventually settled on a date that I will never forget in my life, March 15th. Why does March 15th matter to me? Why will I never forget that date? Well, as I just said, that was the date that I had settled on the release for Phantom Rider, the Vimeo only release, and we made that date. The film came out that day on Vimeo. But the reason I will never forget that date is because leading up to that date, I had seen a few things about this new sickness in China. This new illness, this new bug. Now, I'm not going to say the name of it because YouTube, for whatever reason, they demonetize your entire video when you say the name of what this bug is. So I'm going to call it the macaroni, right? To try to bring a little levity here. So I started hearing that over in Wuhan, China, they had this new macaroni that was deadly as can be. And I remember seeing this footage of the Chinese government decided they wanted to test this person. And he did not want to be tested. And they sent their army in there to drag him out by his ankles to test him. And I was like, damn, man. China doesn't play like with the human rights. When they decide they want something, they're going to get it. But I remember being very, very worried because the next thing I saw was the Chinese walking down in the middle of a street and they had these big fog guns. They were just blasting what I later learned was disinfectant down the middle of the road. And again, I thought that's pretty crazy. That must be some powerful macaroni. But that was about the limit that I thought of it. I wasn't worried at all for myself at that time or anybody here in America. And we've had this before where we hear about some new bug that is just SARS or you know we've heard this a lot, right? Ebola, and it comes out and they contain it and then it goes away. But on March 15th, I got a phone call from my friend who was working with the production company that was making or was going to make this special. And he said, I need you to give me a call about this special over in Australia because I don't think it's going to go anymore. And I was so bummed out. I was like, oh man, the fires must be just really bad over there. So I called him up and I said, yo, what up, Rick? He said, yeah, man, you got my message? I said, yeah. He goes, I don't think it's going to go. And I said, so they shut it down? He goes, no, they haven't officially shut it down yet. He was like, but I'm telling you, I don't think it's going to happen. And I said, why? And he goes, because we just got sent home. And I go, well, what do you mean? And he goes, we just got sent home. We can't work in the offices anymore. And I go, due to an Australian fire? And he's like, where have you been, man? No. He goes, due to the macaroni. I'm like, you're kidding me. And he goes, listen, they're shutting everything down right now. They're shutting everything down. Right after I got off the phone with him, Gavin Newsom comes on, the air and says, yeah, we're LA is getting shut down. There's a stay-at-home order. But it was funny how they did it. It was like a nobody panic, but panic type of thing. It was like, right now there's just a stay-at-home order. Don't worry. Businesses are still open. You could still, go to places if it's an emergency. But we need everybody to kind of just, try to stay at home. And that quickly unfolded like, 2 to 3 weeks later. Uh, basically we learned there was a plan. There was a plan to kind of shut everything down in an escalating pattern. Until on April 4th, suddenly wearing the face mask became law in Los Angeles. And suddenly everything was shut down. Bars were shut down. Live music venues were shut down. The malls were shut down. My DVD plant, as many of you guys know, has been shut down since, March 15th. Like everything was shut down unless you were, quote, an essential worker. Which is funny, now we know what essential means. But at that time, no one knew what that meant. What's an essential worker? To those of us who work, we all thought, well, what I do is essential. People, they want what I do. But then, you figure out later, they tell you, no, essential is like, doctors. Essential is like those who work on the power grid for the city. Essential is EMTs, teachers, so it was this whole, process where suddenly these movies like Outbreak, that shit was becoming real. That was like my life now. I'm like, it was like all of you, man. I sat there going, wow, this is real. So I kept thinking, how many people are going to die of this? And for me personally, that was even more of a kind of strike to the heart because, as many of you know, my father at that time was struggling. He had began to. I'm still not there, guys. I'm not at a place where I can just openly speak about it like it was something that happened years ago. I miss my dad so fucking bad, guys. Yeah, man. My dad said to me once, There are some things in life that time cannot heal. Sometimes things just hurt worse. And that's how I view the loss of my father. Right now, that's where I'm at. At the beginning of the year of 2020, my dad went from feeling perfectly fine, as healthy as can be, to losing, 60 pounds in 6 months and eventually dying on April 21st of 2020 from what they called malignant catatonia, which, if you look it up, it's basically just another term for saying someone lost their mind and they don't know why. They stop eating, they stop talking, they lose the ability to communicate, they just rock back and forth. So the whole time all of this stuff is going on with the macaroni, this is happening with my dad simultaneously. Until, like I said, on April 21st, Pops passed away alone. And I remember thinking, God, this year cannot get any damn worse. Just a wild year that it just seemed like you kept waiting for, some round of great news to come along and kind of pick everybody back up again, and it just seemed to never come. Shortly after my dad died, I heard a couple weeks later, Little Richard died. And I was not great friends with Little Richard, but it was just another thing that happened that I was like, wow, because the first person I ever met that was, quote, famous in Los Angeles was Little Richard. I've told the story before, but my band, 35-Inch Mutter, was brought out to Los Angeles to play way back in 1998. Believe it or not, we were brought in here to play by Rick Rubin, as well as another guy named Perry Watts Russell from Capitol Records, Scott Austin, and a bunch of different record labels. And I had just landed in L.A. We had, taken, the interstate system from the airport, 405 to La Cienega. I rolled into the Hyatt House, Continental Riot House. You've seen it in all the rock movies that are made, the I Am a Golden God, Legendary Hotel. And I walked through the front door, and right out the elevator, loud as can be, is Little Richard just saying hello to everybody and greeting everybody. And he greeted me, and where you from, young man? And he had his, it was really cool. It was really cool. And it was my first time of seeing, like, this is, a Hollywood star, and it was everything you would imagine, man. I mean, he was big and he was bright. He had 6 layers of caked makeup on. It was the first time I'd ever seen a man wear tons of makeup, and he put smiles on faces. And I was like, oh my gosh, a lot of people are dying. And then on May 25th, a gentleman that I did not know died in a terrible way. A man named George Floyd. Like many of you, when I watched the footage of George Floyd dying, I was disgusted. Angry, upset, confused. Confused by, that's probably the best term. I was just confused. I was like, how is this police officer executing this man? And that's what it was, an execution. How is this happening? And nobody's responding. And not just the police officers, okay? Not just the cops that were sitting by watching, this other police officer drive his knee into his neck until he can't breathe and then hold him for 3 minutes while he can't breathe as other police officers watch this. But I remember thinking, why isn't anybody in the community? Why isn't the person who's holding the camera over there trying to push the cop off this guy? I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand what I was watching and why it was allowed. And not only why was it allowed, but why was it filmed? It was horrific. And that's when the public responded, and the riots and the looting began. If you look at the screen right now, this happened a half a block from my house. When all was said and done, in a 6-block radius, 240 businesses in Santa Monica were robbed, looted, destroyed, burnt down, set on fire. So when I tell you things got real in Santa Monica, it got real. There was a time where my entire front yard, my front yard to my place, the courtyard, was completely engulfed in tear gas. There were people screaming and running and gunshots, and I mean, like, it was crazy. Crazy enough that the people in my complex, we all met in the middle of the courtyard to say, how many, women and children do we have here? How many men do we have here? Where are the, exit points and entry points? How can we, protect ourselves? Who has weapons? Who has guns? Who has ball bats? And we figured it out to protect our place through the night. At 3 a.m., I had my post. That was my watch to make sure no one came in this area that wasn't supposed to. It was wild. It was insane, guys. Like, it was crazy. And this continued on, across the country, right? We saw this. We saw, people defending their property, people, out in their front yards with guns, saying you're not going to, destroy my stuff. The upper Northwest in Seattle, we saw what I believe is pure insanity with this, CHAZ stuff where they, took over a portion of the city to call their own and, started this whole defund the police Minneapolis, this defund the police movement, which, look, I completely agree that systematic racism exists. Of course it does. And there's an answer to that. I don't understand how defunding the police is that answer. I've yet to hear a logical explanation as to why that should occur. It doesn't make any sense to me. But we saw this across the country. America suddenly seemed to be at war with itself. If things weren't wild enough with the macaroni, now Americans are seemingly at war with Americans. And I felt for all sides. I'm like, man, can you imagine, being a member of the armed forces and being called in and told, like in the situation in Washington, where everybody on the street was tear gassed so Trump could take a photo in front of the church. Could you imagine being the guy that was given the order? That you're told, hey, those peaceful protesters there, you take that baton, you put it upside their fucking head, and you get them off this street. Can you imagine being the guy to get that order? What do you do? What do you do if you're a conscientious objector to what is going on? It was just a terrible situation across the board. A terrible situation across the board. And no one seemed to know what was going on. And it was only made worse, because I want to make this point. I don't want to come off here like I'm anti-military or anti-police. Or I'm not. I'm pro-military. I'm pro-police. But I completely also support the idea that we've got to make massive changes. And if that's what defund the police was, basically a scare tactic to show how serious the left is And I hate how they say the left too, because you know, I don't. I just said it, and I don't believe that. It's not like only the left wants racism not to exist. Everybody who's a decent human being is against racism. You know, I think the defund the police call, and tell me if I'm wrong, was just more, like I said, was just more of a tactic to try to get people's attention on a scale, as if to say, this time around, we need something real. So if we start chanting for defund the police, do we have your attention now? That's how I took it. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe, there are people who truly think the answer to stopping crime and to stopping systematic racism is to eliminate police. I don't understand how that could work. But again, if that is your call and you believe that, explain to me why in the comments. I don't get it. But I think a major problem with the Black Lives Matter movement is the absolute lack of any real leadership. And that's the same thing for any of these, what people call left movements, which they're not left movements. Again, anybody I would believe that's a good person, would want to stomp out racism. Anybody that's a good person, would want the police department to be there to, to serve and to protect us. You're not left if that's what you want. You know what I mean? But the issue, I think, that is just, I can't stress this enough, is the absolute lack of leadership. For example, right now, tell me the name of the leader of BLM. There might be one or two of you that actually knows without Googling it. Now, what's funny is if you do Google it, you'll find out that the BLM leader actually just signed a deal to make movies. They just signed a deal, I think it's with Warner Brothers, to make movies. I mean, that, I can't even stress how ridiculous that is. Can you imagine? Like, try to imagine. Suddenly, we're back in the days of Malcolm X. Try to imagine Malcolm X holds a meeting and says, all right, everybody, thank you all for, fighting really hard for what we want. All is well. I just talked to Hollywood, and they're going to pay me a lot of cash to make some movies. We're all good. We're getting there, guys. I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I mean, could you imagine MLK? Can you imagine, Dr. King, getting everybody together and going out, listen, I know we're fighting for equality and we're fighting, I have a dream, you know what I mean? And then saying, but all is well. I signed a 3-picture deal today with Warner Brothers. And we're all good. I'm going to make some movies about how we feel. No, man, at that point, you're owned by the system, man. The point should be the opposite of that. It should be the opposite of that. And unfortunately, 2020 took away somebody that did represent that, somebody that actually stood hand in hand with Dr. King down in Selma. Talked about John Lewis. July 17th, 2020 took John Lewis as well. What an incredible life. Look, I could spend the next, 400 hours talking about what this man has accomplished. Please take the time to Google and read about the life of John Lewis. I mean, this is what the BLM movement needs. It needs a John Lewis. It needs somebody that says, no, you don't get to give me a 3-picture deal so I'll go away. So I'll be quiet. So I'll keep the movement in line. No. No, that's not what we're doing, I don't think people today that are leading these movements, like the BLM, I just don't think they have the same conviction of what I've seen. Could you imagine being down? Think about this: being down and marching in Selma, for example. You're down in Selma, and you're going to march into this city, and you know when you get there, there's going to be a bunch of police officers and a bunch of civilians that are going to take a fucking ball bat to your head because of what you believe. Because you want equality. And your conviction is that we're not going to be violent. We're going to take that ball bat to the head so the world can see these monsters for who they are. And if I survive, and I wake up tomorrow and I'm alive, and if I could walk, I'm going to march back into that town. Can you imagine having that kind of conviction? That's the kind of conviction it takes to change the world. I mean, think of what Martin Luther King accomplished without violence. The power of the word. You know? The power of being a true orator, a statesman, somebody who spoke so passionately of justice, of brotherhood, of love, of family, of what's needed in life to feel complete. You know? That's why I get so frustrated with the BLM movement, because I don't know what it stands for. One day it stands for George Floyd, but so many people are hijacking George Floyd and his loss. They're hijacking that to use it for whatever new thing they want to use it for. Suddenly you have people for the BLM movement are going, hey, these guys over here that marched with us for like 5 miles and then at the end started fighting, well, we're not with them and they're not with us, so just know that. But it's like, but wait a minute, for the 3 or 4 miles that they marched with you, they were with you. Until the very end when they got violent and decided, to start smashing shit, then you're saying, but they're not with us now. And I agree, maybe they're not with you now. But the point is, no one knows what with you means. Because you don't have a leader that I could, stand behind, that I can march with. That's the importance of having a leader. Martin Luther King stood for something. So if you stood next to him, you stood for him. So I hope as things continue, I hope that the Black Lives Matter movement, as it acknowledges that it is a rightful political movement now, I hope they become more defined within their leadership, because the more and more you have these leaderless protests, the more and more confusing it is for everybody. You have situations like you did in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where Jacob Blake, another black man, was shot in the back and killed by police. Shot in the back and killed, in which riots broke out instantly in Kenosha, where people started destroying their own neighborhoods. And I know that seems so incredibly ignorant. I understand when people go, well, all they're doing is burning down their own place. Think what that says when you're so frustrated with how things are that you're just burning down your own cities because you've got to do something. You've got to rage somewhere. You've got to let the government, elected government officials know that you are just ungodly pissed off. And yeah, it's completely ignorant to burn down your own neighborhoods, your own cities. That's like mindless. But that's what happens when you don't know who's listening, you don't know who you talk to, and you don't know what the solution is, but you want to make sure that everybody knows how you feel. And then you get these cases like Kyle Rittenhouse, which was still just a fascinating case from a legal standpoint, but it begs so many questions as to who's responsible and who isn't, who do you blame, who do you don't. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Kyle Rittenhouse was a 17-year-old boy who lived in Antioch, Illinois, that went into Kenosha with the goal of helping people to protect their property and to also give people CPR and medical treatment, because he was trained to do that as well. He was 17 years old. So he came to town with an AR-15 that he legally purchased through a loophole. Okay? So while in Kenosha, Kyle sees this group of guys that are trying to burn down this gas station, and they start by lighting a fire in this gigantic trash dumpster, in which Kyle runs over and he puts the fire out with an extinguisher. Well, the group of guys who started the fire were pissed off, and now they see him as the enemy. Now they see this outsider that is coming in and is trying to stop them from protesting and from exercising their disgust. When the kid is trying to make sure that somebody, doesn't lose their property, somebody that is not involved with the Jacob Blake shooting doesn't lose their property. And he's trying to make sure that people don't get injured, and if they do, that they have treatment. So after he puts this fire out, this group of guys, there was 4 of them, begin chasing him. And not only do they begin chasing him, they open fire on him. They open fire on him, and they hit somebody next to him that just falls to the ground at this gas station. And this kid is bleeding out in front of Rittenhouse. And he realizes these guys aren't done. After shooting him, they're still coming after me. So he dodges around the gas station and takes off running down the middle of the street towards police officers. Okay? He's trying to get to cops because armed men who were trying to destroy the community are chasing him. Armed men who have fired upon him and have shot somebody now. So he gets to the middle of the street and they're closing in. He's just not fast enough. Like I said, he's a young kid. He's carrying an AR-15. He's running as fast as he can. And these 4 kids are closing in which one finally gets to him and trying to, outstep him as he's running. Kyle falls to the ground, in which a kid takes a swing at him with a brick, and another kid pulls out his weapon. Well, Kyle turns around and he shoots 2 of the kids dead. Just turns around, pulls a trigger, boom, hits the first one, dead. Boom, hits the second one, dead. The third one, who was just coming in at him, sees this and starts trying to back up, and Kyle shoots him in the arm, blowing his bicep off. Well, everybody who's watching this now, they're just seeing the end of it. They're seeing a young kid with an AR-15 just laying people out. So right after this happens, Kyle gets up and takes off running back down the street towards the police officers, in which he holds his hands completely high in the air. And he says, "You probably got calls about me. I was just attacked, and I shot these guys." And his arms are up in the air. He's giving himself up. He's saying, "It was me." In which the cops don't even take a statement from him. They wait till he's to the side of them, and they take off. They take off. In which he was completely fine, and he wasn't even picked up till the following day. He continued to go about his work to help people with CPR and to try to protect people until the following day. Now, this was all because this Jacob Blake gentleman was shot and killed. Shot in the back and killed. Due to systematic racism. This is a terrible time. A terrible time in our country, because it's disgusting to me that racism is still a thing, that is so prominent and so strong. So incredibly prominent and so incredibly strong still to this day. And Rittenhouse has been locked up in jail since the 26th of August. And no one knows right now what his fate's going to be. No one knows. My guess is he's going to do some time, some extensive time. But I think the question is, could a 17-year-old boy, does he have the wherewithal, the understanding politically and socially and militarily, does he have the understanding, to act in the capacity that he was acting? And should others have gotten involved? Should his parents have gotten involved? Should there have been police officers locally that saw him earlier in the night that said, hey, what are you doing here? And when he says, well, I'm a part of a militia, I'm down here to help. Should there not have been police officers that said, listen, we need to disarm you and take that because you can't be running around on the street with an AR-15, and we also have this under control. We need you to go home to your family. If you want to be involved in law enforcement, there is, a way that you can do this. But this ain't it. The way to get involved is to not just show up to a war zone and say, I'm here to help. Again, I don't know. It's that case specifically, guys, has just, I've been following it closely because I don't know how I feel about it. And I'm really interested to see how it comes out, because as they say, what doesn't get you in the wash might get you in the rinse, But the hits just kept coming in 2020, because on October 6th, just a few blocks from me, the world lost Eddie Van Halen, man. Eddie Van Halen, jeez. There will always be arguments as to who's the greatest guitar player of all time. Is it Eddie Van Halen? Is it Jimi Hendrix? Some people would, argue it's Eric Clapton. Some people would say it's Jimmy Page. Some modernists would say that it's Jack White, which I could see an argument for that as well. But I think it's about catalog and about what you do in those hit songs. And I don't know that there's ever been a guitar player whose personal style defined a sound, an overall sound of a band, more than Eddie Van Halen. You could hear Eddie Van Halen no matter who he played with. Listen to the guitar solo in Michael Jackson's Beat It. That's Eddie Van Halen, and you could hear it a mile away. So, Eddie was just earth-shattering, His musical ability was so far beyond. Like, he's the Michael Jordan, right? Like, in the NBA, people always use that comparison. They say, he's the Michael Jordan of this. Because in the NBA, it was so obvious that the best in the NBA were all on this one line. And then there was this one guy that was so much better than all of them. That was so much better than the best. And that being Michael. And for me, That's who Eddie Van Halen was. He was the best, you know. And like I said before, Eddie Van Halen, his music defined my, high school. There's just so many songs between high school and college that were Van Halen songs, and then I was a Van Hagar guy too. Like I totally got into David Lee Roth, but I got into David Lee Roth backwards. Like the first Van Halen song that I heard that I loved was "Right Now." The piano song, do 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 that starts out. Like "Right Now" was like such a good song. And then I got into, their "Oh You Ain't One Two" record and "Summer Nights" and then 5150 just blew my mind. And that was, obviously the first Sammy record. And I just fell in love with this party rock summer jam. Everything was just about partying and love and fun. And then I went backwards and I found the Panama and the Jump and, you know, I live my life like there's no tomorrow. Like the David Lee Roth version was so much fun. And think about that. What does that say when you could take two different singers, in Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth, and have two separate diamond selling careers. Diamond selling meaning platinum is 1,000,000 records. Van Halen had diamond records, like over 10 million per record. So yeah, Kobe, Little Richard, Eddie Van Halen. I mean, 2020 took down stars, man. It took down heroes. 2020 took down heroes, legends. Legends. And 2020 wasn't done yet either. In the month of October, not only did we lose Eddie on October 6th, on Halloween, we lost Sean Connery. Sean Connery, talk about, again, legend. Now, I grew up watching Roger Moore. That was my James Bond. But I remember my dad saying to me, yeah, look, Roger Moore's good, but the best 007 is Sean Connery. And I eventually went back and watched all the Sean Connery 007 movies. And my dad was right. Sean Connery was the man. I mean, not only was he an incredible James Bond, but he just had that legendary tone, that vocal tone, that rise to your feet, Dragon Slayer. He just had that you just can't, you're just born with that. You know what I mean? You can't teach that to somebody. You just have that, like I said, legend, gone. Yeah, damn. So many incredible talents lost this year. But unfortunately, in addition to taking away those legends, 2020 also took away a lot of our basic fundamental rights. I mean, I can't leave my house without getting a ticket for enjoying fresh air. The LA homeless population skyrocketed from, 50,000 to almost 75,000 people. 1 in 6 small businesses are not closed, they're gone. They're gone. 1 in 6 small businesses are now gone, while 1 in 4 are struggling to keep their lights on. We have over 50 million people right now that are food insecure, at the same time that the Dow Jones has reached a record, over 30,000. So how is that possible? How is it possible that the Dow Jones is just killing it? Which over the last 8 months, it's been averaging around 1 million people a month. 1 million people a month apply for unemployment. And this has been consistent. So when you hear about Oh, well, the CARES Act just killed it. And look at the great recovery we're having with the Dow. The Dow is not the economy. The Dow is not the economy. And I'll tell you what, if you're in the entertainment business, which is my industry, it has been a battle. I mean, it has been a war. Because think about what the entertainment industry has dealt with. You can't tour, you can't do live events, you can barely go shoot and film anything right now because each state has different rules and policies in regard to the macaroni. It's just, you can't do anything that involves a crowd. Restaurants, hotels are decimated because, again, you can't. Whenever there's like a football game, people go to that game, and when they do, a lot of them are, out of town. They stay at hotels. They stay, the same thing. Any tourist destination, period, is just smoked. LA is hurting. Santa Monica's almost dead. It's on its last leg. I mean, it is completely filled with homeless people that are in such bad shape, man. I see this homeless population. I see what they're struggling with, and it is brutal. And every time I start to, feel like, man, this sucks that this is so hard for me because I've had to change this and do this and that, I look outside my window and see these guys that are just begging for a burger, man. Just doing anything, and there's no help for them. Nothing coming. We are in a bad place financially, America is. It's not a V-shaped recovery. It's a K recovery. 50 million people. Say that again. 50 million people are food insecure, guys. We have not seen that since the Great Depression. Think about that. I mean, did you see the videos of people in line with their cars just trying to get food for Christmas? Holy shit. Holy shit. Now, when it comes to the election in 2020, we all knew it was going to be a nightmare. We all knew that there was no way Trump was going to back down. He told everybody that. He made it very clear. He had no intention of backing down, and he said the only way it was a fair election is if he won, and that's exactly how he views it. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks at this point. Biden is the president. He will be sworn in on the 20th. That is going to happen. The question is, how will America respond to it? Will they, accept him as the president? And I think they will. I think that there's definitely going to be some heavy fireworks before then. I don't think for 1 second that Trump is planning on just, licking his wounds and, like a dog that's been, that's had its nose slapped. I don't think Trump is going to, have his tail cover up his balls as he whimpers across the street into the doghouse. I don't think that's going to go down at all. We already have this going on in January 6th coming up, where basically 140 people now are going to, contest, the votes for Biden to be president. And it doesn't matter. They could contest it all they want. It's not a thing. There's no, like, well, if they contest it, then he won't be president. No, he's president. That's it. It's done, guys. That's it. It's done. Now, if Biden does a terrible job, which I think he is up against one of the most difficult situations anybody could ever possibly imagine, if he does a terrible job in 4 years, he will be voted out. But I do believe, listen, Trump is pot committed. He's made it clear that he's going all the way with his argument against the presidency and of Joe Biden, and it's going to get interesting here coming up. But I don't have the will to even discuss the political side of 2020 this year. I think there was much more interesting things going on than the election. It is what it is, and we'll see how it all plays out. But, the only thing I would add is it's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate that there's such division. Because, again, I know a lot of people that are Republicans that I agree with a lot of the stuff they say. And I know a lot of people that, are Democrats that I obviously agree with a lot of things that they say. And there shouldn't have to be, if you don't agree with me, then, if you're not with me, you're against me type of attitude. It doesn't have to be that way, Because I can tell a lot of you out there that are hardcore, staunch Trump Republican supporters. I can tell you right now, I'm not with you, but I ain't against you, man, in any way. You're an American. I'm not against you at all. We can disagree. That's okay. That's okay. It's wild. I get more concerned with other things that I see, like this bombing in Nashville that took place. Guys, I'm telling you, there is something about that entire situation that just sits in my craw in a really bad way. So this guy took all this time to build this massive bomb to go off on Christmas in downtown Nashville, in which he warns everybody away. He sets up a system to make sure that nobody gets hurt. And he sees his neighbor that morning and says, I will be famous by tonight. And then they say he killed himself, that he sat inside, the giant RV that exploded. That whole thing, to me, seems like an absolute conspiracy to try to make people think you killed yourself. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I do. I sincerely hope this is my conspiratorial mind going. But I just don't understand why you would take that much time and effort and point out to your neighbor that it's important that people remember and know who you are. You say, by tonight I will be famous. So that's important to you that you're famous. Why would you take that much time and effort to just blow up an area and then kill yourself in it so you wouldn't be around to even see if you were famous or not? It doesn't make any sense. And what's incredible is the coverage on it. The coverage on it is incredible. If this guy was in the van, or I'm sorry, in the RV, and if it blew up and they know it, then why is there a new news story on it every single day? There's just something about this that everything in my gut tells me there's more to this story. There's more to this story. Because you know what this bombing was really similar towards, and I hate to point this out, we were talking about leadership earlier. This is like the Weather Underground. Like, if you're not familiar with the Weather Underground, they were a domestic terrorist organization that would do things exactly like this. They would set off bombs, inside federal, buildings and just different places, to protest, the government's involvement in Vietnam and just in general the government's involvement in foreign wars. But they would always set it up where they didn't hurt anybody. There would always be some kind of warning or some kind of situation where these bombs would go off and no, Americans would be hurt. That's exactly what this situation was. They set up this ridiculous bomb. That bomb was something else, man. This guy knew what he was doing and he had some firepower. But it was set up in a way where no one could be hurt, just like the Weather Underground. And the Weather Underground, they communicated in hand signs. They were so geeked out about the FBI recording them and following them. They lived and moved like in hand sign communications. So there was no chance that if someone, turned on you, and you were going to wear a wire, there'd be no chance if you're speaking in hand communications that they could record what you're saying. You know what I mean? So this guy sets up this ridiculous bomb, has it go off, warns everybody away, and signs away his property, and it appears as though he's dead now. That's what it appears. That's what they say, right? He was in the actual, truck that blew up, or the RV that blew up. So it just seems very much like the Weather Underground. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of group that is going to start doing these types of bombings and protests. Having said that, I hope that I am wrong. I hope that this guy was just a nutball and it was a one-off, and that there is not, a new Weather Underground. That's the last thing that we need. We do not need a domestic terrorist organization. But in closing, the last thing that I do want to talk about, and the last thing I want to inform all of you about, is that I have finally heard back from Daniel David Skyfall. And the next podcast I release, which is going to be either tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to let you know what Skyfall had to say, because his predictions were incredible. And what he said about Trump not winning the election when he made the prediction that he would is quite interesting. I can't wait to share this with you, because it makes more sense than you could ever possibly imagine when you look at what's been going on. But in regard to 2020 and the UFO phenomena, everything has been playing out exactly as he predicted, minus the fact that Trump did not win the second term. But again, there's a lot to say about that. And I don't want to give too much of it away right now, because I just want to share with you what Skyfall had to say, not only about that, but about a lot more. So be on the lookout for that podcast. It is coming your way, like I said, in 24 to 48 hours. Overall, my thoughts on 2020 are this, man. Pain is an incredible teacher. Struggle is an incredible teacher. Loss is an incredible teacher. So if there's one thing that I'm thankful for in regard to 2020, is the test that it provided. The test of character, the test of willpower, the test of integrity. It hasn't been easy for anybody. And with that, here's to making 2021 the best year we have ever had in our fucking lives. I'm dead serious, man. I love you guys. Thanks for hanging with me. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being my family. Let's do this. 2021 is here. Much love. And I will be back tomorrow with more. All the best.